If you're new to Next Practices Weekly, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity, I4CP. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance in organizations. That's really what we focus on in our major research studies, of which we do 4 or 5, maybe 6 a year. We do a lot of smaller studies as well, pulse surveys and the like. We have a member peer community, always looking at HR through a business lens. As I mentioned, we have a diverse set of member organizations, so a special welcome to anyone on the call who might be with one of these organizations. What you see on the screen is just a small sampling of those logos. You see they range from very large organizations like Microsoft and Amazon, Visa, 3M, and many others. They also span across all different market industries, market verticals, from high tech, finance, manufacturing, retail, science, healthcare, you name it. We've got a growing cohort of startup organizations that are smaller but growing fast and have a diverse set of HR needs because of that. We've also got regional banks, regional healthcare companies, really spanning all areas of business. So if you're not with a member organization and would like to learn more about what's involved, just reach out to anyone at I4CP and we'd be happy to get you that information, or go to i4cp.com and fill out the contact form and we'll be in touch. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and most weeks I have the pleasure of co-hosting Next Practices Weekly, and this week I'm joined by Lorrie Lykins, our Vice President of Research and Executive Editor. Good morning, Lorrie.
Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody.
Great to have you with us. You'll be leading the conversation with our special guest, who we'll bring on in just a moment. As I said, we're in October. Somehow the summer has gone by, and we'll have 5 sessions in October. Today, October 3rd being the first. Then you see October 10th, the 17th, 24th, and we'll have one on Halloween as well. We've got a great lineup of guests coming up. We also periodically, less often, not every week, but we do have some sessions that are not at this date and time. If you want to attend these, of course, they're open to anyone if the timing works for you, but we'd encourage you to pass this along to any of your global colleagues, particularly those in maybe Europe, Middle East time zones that might fit better. Also want to note that every year in March, we gather in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Fairmont Princess, a great facility, for our Next Practices Now conference. We had it this past year. It was our biggest ever. We're looking forward to breaking that record in early March of 2025. We have announced the first set of speakers for this event. You see, we'll have HR leaders from ServiceNow, Atlassian, Visa, Microsoft, and others, along with thought leaders like Peter Capelli from the Wharton School, our own Rob Cross. This is just the first set of speakers that we're announcing. Probably have another 2 sets like this, 25 or 30 speakers in the end. There is a discount. It's not shown on the screen here, but if you register before November, I believe November 15th, you can save, I think it's $300 on your registration. Registrations are already pouring in. We often get a bunch of them right after the previous conference. So we've had some folks that have been registered for months. What's unique about this event, as I've said in past weeks, is that there's no expo, there's no trade show, no vendors at this event. So it's just for HR leaders, HR professionals like yourself. So use the link that's over in the chat. Thank you, Zeta, for putting that there. If you would like to learn more, and go ahead and register. And with that, I'm going to bring Lorrie back on and ask Lorrie to introduce today's special guest.
Thank you. And once again, hello, everybody. My voice is a little rough. I'm recovering from a bout with COVID, but I'm really glad to be back at work. Before we get rolling, I just want to remind everybody we really want this to be a conversation. We're not going to be showing you a bunch of slides today. We're going to have a discussion, and we're going to cover a lot of ground today, from employee engagement to HR structures to managing HR across a very globally distributed and hybrid team. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So today we're really thrilled to welcome Paulo Pisano, EVP and Chief Human Resource Officer at Booking Holdings. Welcome. Good morning, Paulo.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Great to be here.
Or good afternoon, because you're in Amsterdam.
Indeed.
So I know that you've held a lot of leadership positions in some of the world's most admired companies, Fortune 500 companies, Citigroup, Marsh McLennan, Barclays, Pearson. But would you please give us an introduction, tell us a little bit about your career trajectory, and what led you to your current role with Booking Holdings?
Sure, with pleasure. Look, I'm originally from Brazil. First generation Brazilian in my family. So from a very early age, I was exposed to more than one culture at home. And I think that played a role later in my career. I grew up in Rio. I was very attached to Rio. So if you asked me back in my teen years if I'd be outside of Rio or Brazil, I've said a straight no. But then I went to university back there, and during my time at university, I came across an NGO called IASEC. It's in the US, but it's European in origin. I think it might still be the biggest student-run NGO in the world, and that effectively changed the course of my life in a way because I started getting involved with them. It was arguably my first job in something closer to the corporate world. And when I was working with them, basically two things happened. One is I got exposed to senior people in organizations. So it gave me an opportunity to work very early in my career with folks in companies and to see what was going on for them, how they thought, what was in their mind. And also it opened my mind to the international space in business because we ran conferences and events in different countries. So coming from that, I was already, shifting my view, I guess, on how to think about my career. I started my career first in the consulting space, and I loved the intellectual stimulus of consulting, the variety of clients and things you worked on. But as I was working on that, I was missing a bit of I'd say the depth. The big question for me back then was, we come to clients with arguably very good ideas on what they need to do to make their business better. But the question for me was, well, how do you move them from what they're doing today to what they need to do in order to implement those changes? It was a lot around implementation execution, which, by the way, is something we didn't do where I was working at the time. So I was getting very curious about that. And that's when I came across the HR and the org development and the change field. And it came to me back in the day through Citibank. They were running an international HR development program. So it was through that program that I got into HR, got into this space. I left Brazil. Originally, the idea was to rotate for a couple of years outside Brazil and to go back. And the rest is history, as they say. I ended up not going back to Brazil. I spent about, I think, 7 years with Citi, moving around the Americas. I lived in a few countries, including the US. And it was my academy, I'd say, right? I learned HR from some amazing people there. It was a phenomenal company back in the day, incredibly global in nature. I think back then it was the biggest bank. And uh, and after that, I got curious about other types of work, about other sectors, but also I got curious about moving from the Americas. So I decided to pursue an MBA, and I specifically focused in Europe to do that. So it gave me the opportunity to live some time in Europe and also in Singapore. I finished business school and decided to stay in Europe. And then I had, this opportunity to experiment different sectors, right, in different locations. So I worked in, as you've mentioned, companies in professional services, finance, media, education, energy, and now more recently, technology. And I'd say, Lorrie, that for me, I've always prioritized projects and teams over the brand or the title of the role, so to speak. It was always about, is the project interesting enough? Is it challenging enough? And what's the team, right, that I have across? And that paid off, I think, very good dividends, right? I learned a lot from my colleagues. I learned a lot from the types of work that I did. Booking came, I would say, a bit left field. That was probably not the traditional profile they were looking for. They were, likely hiring in some of the more kind of traditional native, digital or tech companies. But to their credit, and I think it's still something we focus very much today. They were very good at thinking about what is it that the company needs at this moment, and how do we find that in a diverse set of candidates. After connecting and realizing that we were very aligned on how we thought about things, and my experiences, I think, were quite aligned with what the company was looking for. I joined in first through Booking.com. So my first couple of years in the company were through Booking.com. Booking Holdings did not have a chief HR role back then. So from Booking.com, then I was invited to take on the Booking Holdings role as well. And currently I hold both hats, right? So I'm still the chief people officer for Booking.com, and I also hold the responsibility for the group.
So can you share a little bit about everything that's under the umbrella of Booking Holdings? I know one of my favorite apps is, especially when I lived in New York, Open Tables. Open Tables saved me many times because it's just a great app and really helpful. But, you know, in big cities, sometimes it's really difficult to find a restaurant nearby and, you know, grab a reservation. So, but what else is under that really big umbrella?
Absolutely. It always makes me happy to connect with customers. I was a customer also of some of our brands way before I ever imagined, right? I'd work here. So there's something
Right.
nice, I guess, on an emotional level when you end up working with a company you're a customer of. So if you look at Booking Holdings, we are the world's leading provider in online travel and related services. We work with travelers and partners in over 200 countries, just to give you a sense of the dimension of the business. And the brands we have, the most well-known brands are Booking.com, Priceline, pretty big in the US. Agoda is particularly big across Asia Pacific. Kayak, as well as MetaSearch, that's part of our group. OpenTable, you've mentioned. And there are some brands that might be more B2B, that might be less visible for people who are not in the industry, but we're very well known in those spaces like Rocket Travel or like Fair Harbor. So there's a collection of brands in the group. We operate in over, I think, probably over 40 languages around the world, and we have about 24,000 employees in the company in
Wow.
total, right?
Yeah.
But it is a very scaled business, right, in this space. I think back in 2023, we booked more than 1 billion room nights globally through our platforms. So it's our reach is quite significant.
Definitely. Okay, so speaking of that reach and scope and depth, can you share a little bit with us about how HR is structured in such a such a diverse and distributed company?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, we are, as a holding company, we historically have provided a very good degree of autonomy across our operating companies, right? And we call them brands, but they're opcos effectively, right?
Right.
Um, and if you look into that, what we try to do, right? We have a business where we have this independent brands over the years, but as we've become more complex, and as we look at new ways to achieve more, to build scale, to be more efficient, to increase productivity, et cetera, we started looking at how we can balance an approach where we have the right level of balance between autonomy and independence for agility and for speed within the brands, but also where we can build operating leverage, right? Where we can build standards, or we can leverage infrastructure, talent, align on ways of doing things across the group. HR is no different, right? So I'd say on a journey where we are finding kind of that right balance, where we are providing support and autonomy for brands, but also finding which are those areas where we have to align, where we want to standardize things, or we want at least to work in alignment with certain principles that should be the same across the organization. We do work from a holding standpoint, for example, in that balance of challenging and supporting brands and what they do from an HR standpoint. And we also try to create connective tissue in the organization, right? So how do we build more collaboration? How do we build communities of practice where teams from across the group can work together, can share resources, can share knowledge, so we can be more impactful or more effective with the business, right? So again, it's a mix of centralized and distributed, but with a focus on agility and with a focus on impact in the business.
Got it. Um, I know this is a little bit off topic, but what is your HRIS? What does your tech stack look like?
We use a number of different things. The kind of the foundational, I'd say, is we use Workday.
Okay.
We've been using Workday for a number of years. Not one single instance of Workday. So again, part of our history of being, relatively independent, we may have slightly kind of different instances.
Right.
And then we've been using and experimenting with a number of other platforms to support different things in employee engagement, in HR analytics, in recruiting, et cetera. And we've changed some. We're on a learning curve, I think, like a lot of us, right?
Yeah, I think everybody's in that boat. So one of the projects that we're continuously working on at I4CP is our in-depth research on culture, organizational culture, what it looks like. And we've put together a pretty solid list of the characteristics of very healthy cultures. But I'm always curious, if you were interviewing somebody, Paulo, and they said, "Hey, could you describe the culture? What would I experience from a cultural perspective in the organization? How do you describe your culture?"
Look, I think there may be slight nuances across the group, right? Because our brands have grown independently. We've grown through acquisitions over the years. So there are certain things that will be quite specific to the brands. But I would say if you look across the group, there are some pretty important commonalities. The first thing that comes to mind, and it's the thing that I hear the most from people that come in, is this notion of being a high execution, low ego organization, right? There's very little politics around the organization. And I've been in very, highly political environments, organizations, and sectors
Yeah.
before. And the beauty of it is that you don't have to spend a lot of time and energy managing the political environment. You can focus that on real work, right, and real impact. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying there's zero politics. I think whenever you have, two or more people working together, you're going to have a degree of complexity, but it is really contrasting with the majority of spaces I've seen around.
Yeah.
Um, so low ego from that standpoint, high execution, very strong focus on all hands on deck, and let's work on things together. So I think that's a common characteristic. The second thing I think we're very proud of is a high degree of integrity on doing things the right way, doing things with ownership, but doing the right thing is a value that is replicated across our various brands. And that's, again, paid dividends over the years for us. Um, and I'd say there's a high level of collaboration, a very high level of collaboration within each brand. We're trying to build that collaboration more effectively across the group because that's new in comparison to the let's say the age of the company, right? In the last like 3-4 years, we've been amping up or ability to collaborate more effectively across our group. But collaboration is there. There's goodwill, right? There's assumed positive intent and openness, which is really nice. It makes a difference. We are a very data and insights driven organization as well, right? Booking.com as an example, very early on, I think was one of the precursors in A/B testing in the corporate and the technology environment. I mean, these days you have a lot of, many other companies do, I think, very good work on this, but I've heard from many of them saying that they've learned or got inspiration, before my time here with Booking.com. And that, I think that creates a very particular culture in that for many things, not for all things, but for many things, data and insights will speak louder than hierarchy, right? Doesn't matter kind of your pay grade, is that what is the data? What is the experiment telling us? What insights do we have? And that creates a great space for dialogue, right? Where individuals much further down, let's say in the hierarchy of your organization, can challenge and can have open conversations and lead us to experiment in new areas. There's more I could say, but these are, I think, the front of mind ones that I hear the most from people.
If I could jump in real quick, there's one question from the chat, and I encourage others to use the chat to ask questions as we cover a variety of topics today.
Yes.
Renew asked Paulo if you could just double click on, you said it's very strong collaboration within each brand, and now the challenge is to collaborate across the brands, which only makes sense. Is there an example of something where you're focusing on that, maybe as a first go?
Well, it's a great question. Thanks for that question. And I think there's many areas. Let me first maybe talk about the context, right? I think like many things we do in the organizational design space, I say that organizational design is an exercise of trade-offs, right? You organize in a certain way because you're optimizing for solving a problem or for pursuing an opportunity. And that's great. And as you do that, chances are you're going to start building other problems or building barriers to other opportunities. And there's a point in time where that other side is complex enough that you need to reorganize, rethink, right? For us, the organizing with independence and autonomy was great because it gave us a lot of agility, right? It allowed us to get to market, to stay close to our customers. As things became, the market became more competitive, more mature market, more complexity in the market, we started seeing the benefit that we were maybe leaving value creation opportunities on the table because we were sometimes either not connecting, not joining up, or we were even competing with one another, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we might be competing in some markets. So the question then is, how do you change that, right? Because we've basically programmed our people for one thing and now we're moving to another one. We've seen that as examples to go to your specific question. And in the HR space, for example, we had 6 different ways of tracking employee engagement in the organization with different questions, different timings, different platforms. And after a number of conversations around this, we converged on this notion that engagement shouldn't be that different. How we measure, how we track it. It's like other financial metrics or other metrics in the organization. So it took some time for us to come together and think about how do we optimize something that balances the interests and the reality of each of the organizations, but also of the group. And now we are converging, actually from next year, on we're going to have one way to track engagement. That still gives flexibility for brands to have a number of questions that might be unique to them, but there's going to be a core set of metrics that we're saying this is going to be done across the group, right? There could be another example, which is more kind of on the business side, and you're trying to coordinate your marketing activities or your business activities in a way that you're not bumping into another, or you're not cannibalizing each other's business or something like that. So you try to have conversations, at least so you have what I'd call rules of engagement, right? So it's sometimes it's not about how you need to collaborate day to day together, but at least you have rules of engagement so you know who's going to cover what. Like a little bit like, I think in that kind of volleyball team, you have those instances, if you've ever played, where either no one goes for the ball because everyone thought it was going to be somebody else, or everyone goes for the ball at the same time and you bump into one another, right? How do you avoid that so you can play where you're best at, right? You can play to your strengths. I think it's valid for teams, but it's valid for organizations as well. So I'd say those two examples.
I love that volleyball analogy. So let's talk a little bit about the connection between HR strategy and the business strategy. Can you talk a little bit about what your perspectives are on that and what that looks like in your organization?
Sure. So everything we do, right, that the organization needs to be closely aligned with the strategy, right? This is not for booking. This is, I think, everywhere, right? It's got to align with our strategy, which has got to be based also connected to the promise we've made to our customers, to our investors, to our stakeholders in general, right? So the people agenda needs to be very closely aligned with the business agenda, right? And with what are the strongest levers for impact in the business. Now, we are a knowledge economy organization, right? We are, a technology company, or as they say, our assets go home every night, and we hope they come in the next day. And it's a highly competitive talent market out there. So in many ways, I think we're all managing a voluntary workforce in a way, right? There are options. So we need to make sure that our people are at the very core of what we do as an organization. We know people are part of the success of the company. So, the skills of our people, the potential of our people, the belief that our people have in our mission, our vision, in the future of our sector, the future of travel, and what we can do in that future is critical, right? To keep people connected to that. So the way we look at it is first and foremost, and my team has heard me say this multiple times, we are business first, HR second, right? You are engaging with everything we do as a business person. You need to understand you don't have to be as much of an expert in the business as, maybe your colleagues in sales, in marketing, or in product development or in tech, but you need to understand how is it that we create value for customers, and how is it that we capture value as well, right? Because we need to be sustainable, we need to be profitable to be a long-term company. So first, it's we want our people to be focused on that. On the basis of that, that means that our team is going to be closer to the business, right? There's going to be a more capillarity of our team. We're going to be closer to what's happening in the business. And between that connection that our team has with the business and or connection also through our regular annual planning processes and strategic processes, we find ways to keep our people agenda and our people strategy really well connected to the business strategy, to what's most important for the business. And then as we do that, there's a number of things that can help along the way, right? And we can talk about those if you want to double click on it. But for example, you have the business strategy, then you look at that strategy and where is it that HR can help? What are our main areas of impact? What are the levers that we can act on? That helps you in turn, by the way, recontract with the business on the things that you might not do or that you might do but don't need to be gold standard. Maybe it's fine for you to be kind of average, or maybe not to be kind of top in class. But to support that also, then it means you can engage with the business in certain conversations around, not just around what are the projects or the initiatives that we have, but around how the business is going to approach the people theme or the people agenda. For example, through a talent philosophy, right? How do you engage with leaders to go into conversations around how will we make decisions about talent for the organization that are in line with our values and that are in line with our strategy? So there's things like that you can do that help keep your HR agenda really tightly aligned with the business. And then I'd say, just last but not least, is then you need to take that as an organic and as a kind of a live process. It's not something you do once a year and then throughout the year. We know things are changing very fast around us. You need to be able to revisit that and throughout the year recalibrate as necessary, so you keep tied to the business priorities and the business strategy.
It looks like we've had a couple other questions roll in. Tom, you want to call out a few?
A few questions here. I think we'll get to one of them in a moment, but with the agenda that we have planned. But what metrics are you using to tie the sort of people side, the people engagement, to business results? I think that's the one sort of most aligned with what we were just talking about, the HR strategy and the business strategy.
Yeah, so the short answer is it depends. So we look at a number of metrics that we know have a high level correlation with productivity and business results. So first, like from a more kind of standardized perspective, we'll look at a number of engagement drivers in the organization, and we do a lot of analytics kind of in that space. We look at organizational health also from an individual and a team standpoint. So be it sickness rates or kind of things like that. We look at, of course, at attrition. So we look at some of those areas because we know there's a direct connection between that and teams being effective, being fully productive, et cetera. Then we have, I'd say, operational metrics, which might be connected to things like, time to hire, how quickly you onboard people and bring them to being, fully productive and engaged with the organization. And we measure some of that through internal surveys with individuals and with their managers. So there will be some things that are more kind of connected to that. We might look at areas that are linked to employee engagement and productivity, such as managerial capability and effectiveness. And we've done some interesting work actually in the last couple of years having identified an issue on capability and development for managers, building a track for learning for managers, and then measuring the level of kind of engagement of teams under managers that had gone through the program versus the ones that had not gone through the program yet, and seen statistically significant differences there, and positive, of course, differences for folks that had gone through the program. So we look at many of those things. Now, I do have, if you go one step deeper, I do have a deeper, well, I'd say not a criticism, but a bit of a challenge to anyone, right, around how can you truly measure productivity in the knowledge economy, and how do you establish an absolutely direct correlation between something you do and productivity. There are some areas, some job families, some crafts in which it's easier for you to do and to track that. But there are many others where it's not that easy, and you won't see that in the short term, right? So you have to base some of what you're doing on indirect measurements and research that's been done, over a number of years, that will guide you in the right direction. But the short-term feedback mechanism will not be there. And we're careful about not getting into that trap, I guess, of trying to measure too many things that might give you a false sense of, oh, we're making progress, we're becoming more productive, when we know, or we think at least, it's not going to tell you that in the short term. So we it's a bit of less is more on that, but we do track, as I've mentioned, some of those metrics. I think they're very helpful, and I think there's enough insight and research there to tell us that when you're doing well in those, or a combination of some of those, it indicates you're going to have higher engagement, better knowledge for people to do their job, therefore higher discretionary effort, and more productivity, right? But we don't make that direct measurement in the majority of areas.
Paulo, one topic I'm really keenly interested in, and I really want to dig in with you, is employee experience. I know you've been very purposeful and very thoughtful about how you're looking at employee experience, 360-degree employee experience. Can you just give us an overview of what the work is looking like, and maybe some lessons learned?
Yes, I mean, for us, I think everyone, I mean, it's not a new concept, right? Employee experience, and I don't think we do something fundamentally exotic here. But if I again track back to where it comes from, or focus on it, is I think as a kind of a product organization, I think we've some years ago perhaps we've over focused on products for employees, so to speak. And there's been a level of siloing of our initiatives, and not enough integration on how those various things we do come together in creating a better experience for our employees. So a lot of our effort in the last few years was really around trying to join up everything we do under kind of a narrative, and a consistent narrative of building an experience that is seamless, that is highly engaging, where people can do their best and their most creative work at Booking, and do it together, right? Do it as a team, not individually. This was more about Booking.com, but I think we have different versions of that happening across our various brands and across the group. There's not one lever or one silver bullet for that. And this is why we talk about it being 360, is that there's a combination of things, of factors that need to come into play to create that great experience for people. It starts with how you connect with people in the market to begin with. So what is your employer brand? How do you talk about who you are and who you want to be as an organization, so that it helps you link with the right people? But then as people engage with us, can we provide a great candidate experience? And when they join in, what's the onboarding like, and how do we help them, become kind of really effective and act in alignment with their, full potential and their full kind of engagement and, energy in the organization. As they're in, we pay a lot of attention to those critical moments in the development of someone, so that in those moments are kind of well supported and well taken care of, right? Meaning, It could be how you experience the ease of work in the organization. We try to figure out how do we lift some barriers and make things easier. We don't do it alone in HR. This is a kind of business-wide initiative, but we have a role to play helping support that, right? I may not, for example, change processes and procedures or even like technology in the organization, but I can help people think more deeply and be more effective in their ways of working, right? We do a lot of work on culture to support ways of working, to support our mindsets and how people work together, how they work together effectively, how they hold each other to account, how they take a player or a protagonist stance versus a victim when things aren't going well. How do you work with resilience? So we work in that space. We've been focusing for a number of years, even way before my time, on inclusiveness, right? We have a highly diverse workforce, very global, over 140 nationalities. But how do we build an environment that is truly inclusive once you have people from so many different backgrounds and nationalities working together here? How do we help create instances of learning that are not just about formal or structured learning as an event, but a learning organization, a learning culture where learning is embedded in what you're doing, either because your job is designed in a way that's going to take you out of your comfort zone and bring you into kind of that stretch space where you can learn more and more accelerated, where you can have good managers because we're training managers, supporting them and trying to hire good managers as well. So you can learn from your manager. So it's a combination of things that we try to build. And we try to make sure that whatever we do in the employee experience space is integrated. So we don't have separate teams, kind of shipping product, so to speak, that doesn't connect with each other, right? And again, internal comms, super important, right? How do we keep folks connected, have multiple channels of communication, ways for people to connect and engage? How do we support employee-led initiatives through ERGs or ambassador programs? So you have a lot of that kind of, bottom-up and a connection happening. It's a combination of things. But for me, the main topic on that is how do you connect things so that it creates a coherent narrative that your people will understand.
I love that story on the connection of it, the 360-degree nature of it, being deliberate, everything you just said. We had a question in the chat from Deshaun on, so given all of that, how do you enable managers and leaders to execute on that sort of connected nature, all the different moments that you mentioned? What do you do to support managers and leaders to actually make that become a reality?
Yeah, it's a combination of different things, right? So one is awareness. So this is something that if only HR knows that you're trying to build that connection, it's not going to work, right? So first part is you got to build awareness around the organization of the importance of that. Second, after awareness, you got to build access to information. So we've worked on building, for example, there's a manager's portal on an intranet where people can go and find information, understand what's important. And then there's live communications. Whenever you come to specific important moments in time throughout the year in our regular HR processes, for example, come to the end of the year, we know you're going to have to be thinking about reviewing the performance of individuals. After that, you're going to be thinking about their readiness for moves. After that, you're going to be thinking about their compensation. So we hit people with communication around that. So it's well outlined. We run office hours and trainings and focus groups. We try to connect managers that have more success in that space with ones that are learning, right, that are developing in that space. So we do a bit of a combination of things, but in a very, very clear way, we work to support managers and leaders so that they understand, number one, the importance of that link, and number two, their responsibility and their accountability in doing that. And by the way, by saying that, we're not perfect on that, right? There are areas that are still clunky, that still don't work. And this is where our internal feedback mechanisms are really important, because we do have our blind spots, or we do our experiments that don't go right, and we have to track back and rethink a little bit. So that openness to kind of to feedback, I think, is very important, because we can't get better without it.
We definitely saw evidence of that, Paulo, in some research we did a few years ago about employee experience and how important it is to make that data available to managers, especially frontline managers, because those are the
Yeah,
people who are best positioned to really impact employee experience.
absolutely.
Yeah, so the transparency of the data are really important. So we've touched a little bit about employee listening. I4CP, we're a huge advocate of gathering employee sentiment, always on employee listening. You know, uh, Structures. So what are you doing around that? What does that look like at Bookings?
Yeah, look, we have, as I was mentioning just a while ago, we have a variety of approaches across our organization. Good news is, we all have some form of engagement survey running. Some of our companies in the group do it once a year. Some companies go as much as 4 times a year, once a quarter. We all use kind of online platforms for that. We're converging now, as I was mentioning, into one way of doing it, but still building a lot of flexibility so people can do it as much as they want. We do focus groups as needed. We have a very active in some of our organizations where we're deeper on intranets. We have very active engagement for employees in the intranet. That provides a massively effective channel of communication when the organization posts something or someone posts something and you have a lot of reactions and dialogue going on in the organization. We run town halls, ask me anything sessions. So we've built, I think, a variety of ways to keep connected with our workforce in a way, by the way, that it's not just one way, but it's two-way, and it's, well, arguably 360 because it's folks connecting with each other as well. And I think that's helped us enormously, right? Particularly, during the pandemic when we were working remotely, it made a huge difference to already have a strong culture in that space because it helped keep us connected and keep us connected with the organization, but most importantly with each other.
I think that's something, well, I know it's something that I4CP has in common with Booking Holdings because we also were hybrid, remote, very flexible. We were founded as a hybrid organization in '07. So when the pandemic, emerged, we already were well positioned and really understood what that looks like and what needed to be focused on in order to, keep things moving. But we definitely um, heard a lot from a lot of our members who were not prepared in terms of manager capability, leadership development. Folks just were not prepared to lead in a hybrid world or in a virtual environment. So I think this is something that some organizations have really just started to wrap their arms around in the last 4 years. And I know that that's something that you also had in place before the pandemic. You were a hybrid distributed workforce. So any lessons from all of that that you can share with everybody else?
Look, I'm not sure I'm going to have something that's, hugely different from what many of us have experienced there, right? We were already a highly distributed workforce, but I think we had a steep learning curve as well, like many other organizations, because even though we were used to working across different countries, we were also within the countries where we had operations, a highly office-centric culture, right? So people were in the offices day in and day out. So that means that you have people bumping into each other, making connections, having informal conversations at a very high frequency rate. And as we've learned, right, this is something that just doesn't happen online. No matter how well you structured something hybrid or remote, the serendipity of bumping into people in a line for coffee or lunch or connecting ad hoc or walking around the floor and seeing that someone has maybe doesn't have a great face and you want to go and check with them what's going on, or the other way around, you find a team that's celebrating something and can connect. There's a number of things that don't happen remotely. So we had a learning curve also to try to figure out how to navigate around that, for managers to figure out how to navigate and support employees that were going through a really hard time when they themselves, the managers, were also going through a very hard time. For us, it was very important to, I think early on, one of the things we did, I think, across the group was amp up our communications very significantly, just be visible. And if you don't have something really important to say, it doesn't matter. Be there, be available, take questions, connect, say, we don't know, but be visible. And it's interesting because in doing that, which you could argue doesn't demand a whole lot of capability, just demands action and availability. We had a spike in the engagement scores during that initial period where I think people were looking for some sort of anchoring or security, and they got that in the form of we're here, we're with you. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're together, and here's what we're doing little by little, day by day. I think that made a big difference. The second thing that really helped us, and looking back, and we are, I think, amplifying it, is this notion of employees leading on things that are important for them. We had back then through the intranet, employees offering virtual yoga classes, and because such a diverse group of employees, you have so many employees here that have a second, if not a second career, an area of interest that's pretty deep in music or arts or fitness or meditation or you name it. And we've opened up the space where people could help one another on that. So that there was a learning, I think, that was there, maybe latent, but became much more evident for us. And we're trying to support and amplify that. The notion also of this shared responsibility of supporting one another, right? You see something, say something, support, reach out. If you haven't heard from someone, you have to reach out to them. And I think that's true for us in the hybrid environment. We don't see people as much on the day-to-day. That means you have to make an extra effort, maybe to drop a one-liner to someone you haven't been in touch for the last couple of weeks, and just check in on each other and support each other, right? Sometimes a one-liner makes a big difference, right? And the last but not least, I think, is this notion of it's okay not to be okay also, right? It's okay to be vulnerable and to be going through a tough time and maybe not knowing how to deal with it. And we're here to support, right? This notion that we have, this unconditional support for people, that I think that was important. I think that was already part of who we are as an organization, but it was more, I think it was evidenced by the pandemic. And it's something we keep trying to nurture and to protect.
It really gives me pause to think about the power, just the power of that connection. And to your point, just taking time to write a sentence to somebody could mean all the difference in the world. It's just those simple things that are super powerful that we easily forget when we get really busy. But that is definitely something that I personally took away from the pandemic, is how important that connectivity is. So in the last couple of minutes, I would love to hear from you about what you look for, Paulo, in terms of making a hire and adding someone to your HR team. And just what are you seeing right now in terms of trends with the talent pool? But what do you look for the most when you're looking to add to your team?
Well, look, in terms of adding to the team, attitude is paramount, I think, and what I look in that is curiosity is, I think, is really, really important. Teamwork. We're like, we have very kind of strong teams around the organization, and we know that the nature of the ambitions that we have ahead of us, none of them can be done through individual work or people just doing their job, in an isolated manner and just handing it to somebody else, right? We live in such a complex and intertwined environment that for everything we do, we need other people, and we need goodwill and support, and they need us as well. We need to figure out how to be available. So the bend towards like strong teamwork, curiosity, because people who are naturally curious, I think not only they learn faster, but they listen better as well. And if you listen better, and if you're coming into a new environment, you understand it more effectively and understand how you can help and connect with other individuals. In the HR space, the commercial band is really important for me. As I was saying, business first, HR second. Of course, I do want the HR craft knowledge and interest and passion, ideally, but the interest in business, in how business works and how we create value is extremely important, because it's one of the things that helps us keep focused and not end up, spreading ourselves too thin, doing way too many things, which is a classic issue I've seen in the HR space, right? We love products. We love to productize stuff or to create processes for things. It's easy to fall in love with the things that we do. It's exciting, the notion that I can help a business, help a team, help someone. And next thing I know, I have, 200 different things that I'm trying to do, and none of them particularly well. So, but if you have that commercial bent, if you focus on the business, that helps you filter and make choices. And then I'd say, just to bring it back to the beginning of our conversation, integrity is so important, right? And integrity and accountability, that sense of doing things the right way, not taking shortcuts, doing things in a way that's sustainable, right? You're not going to burn a relationship internally or externally in the short term, and then you miss out on the long term. So how to bring people that are, have that strong work ethic and respect and way of doing things. So those are the ones that come to mind.
And then what are your predictions in terms of what's ahead for HR? I know generative AI has just exploded onto the scene, and Tom can attest, and Zeta as well. It's pretty much all we talk about all day long is, the future of work, the future of HR. What are the implications of generative AI? What do you think, Paulo? What do you see in your crystal ball?
Yeah, look, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But it's interesting. Last night, I was at a dinner with a number of chief HR officers of big organizations. We're at dinner together, and the topic was chief HR in the 2030 or something like that, right? And none of us had crystal balls, but we were having an open discussion of that. Of course, generative AI was front of mind. And I think we're all aligned that generative AI, we're in the infancy of it, and it's going to make a huge difference. How it's going to make a huge difference, I sincerely think the majority of us don't have a clue. And the reason I say that, if you look at the early days of the internet, for example, um, you know, the first web pages or the first use of the internet was to replicate what we had in the physical space. It was only years later that you started having things like e-commerce that were impossible in the physical space that now are almost like taken for granted. I think Gen AI, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, but there's going to be many shifts. How our job shifts, I'd say that as not just chief HR officers, but HR professionals, we got to get a lot closer to technology and the impact of technology in the workforce and how we get things done, but also the impact of technology in people's personal lives, because that means, the new generations coming into the workforce, they're deeply influenced and affected by that. And that's going to mean something in how you shape your culture in the organization, right? And then I think together with that, something I've mentioned yesterday is we have to become simplifiers, because there's a lot of complexity that's being generated, not just by technology, by the regulatory environment, by competition, by the success of companies. If you become more successful, you grow, you go to more markets, to more products, to more services. All of those things generate complexity. We have to be master simplifiers, because we have a unique vantage point where we see the whole organization. Typically, we can help keep organizations, simpler or as simple as possible. So I think a combination of being really kind of close to technology, because it will influence significantly, being simplifiers, and then I'd say being connectors as well, because again, from our vantage point, we can help connect different parts of the organization, many times on things that have nothing to do with HR, but we do it because we're commercial and because we're focused on helping the business succeed.
Right. Paulo, thank you so much. I would love to just sit down and pick your brain for another hour, but I'm going to hand the mic back to Tom.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lorrie, and thank you, Paulo. Great conversation, many insights shared. Folks, I'm sure on the call learned a lot. I would like to just double down on what you said about generative AI and how I think your analogy with the early days of the internet, we don't know what the most extraordinary use cases are going to be. And so far, some of them at least are sort of duplicating what we were doing pre-generative AI, which provides value, productivity enhancements, and more. But I think you're right. It's going to be difficult to predict what's coming. I will note that at I4CP, we have a growing catalog, archive, if you will, of use cases that are available to our members. We sort of templatized this. We have dozens and dozens. We're going to soon have hundreds of use cases across the talent lifecycle. So if you're a member of I4CP and didn't realize that, you do have access to that. Once again, though, thank you, Paulo. Great
Thank you so
conversation
much.
today.
I appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
For those on the call that have a certification with either HRCI or SHRM, as always, just note down the relevant program ID or activity ID, and you can get your research credit hour for that. Otherwise, I want to thank you, Lorrie, for leading the conversation today. Great work.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Zeta. And thank you again, Paulo.
Yeah, thank you, Paulo. And everyone have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. And we'll see you next week at the same date and time.